Thanks to the special counsel's thorough investigation, we now know that the Russian operatives who perpetrated these schemes did not have the cooperation of President Trump or the Trump campaign, or the knowing assistance of any other American for that matter. That is something that all Americans can and should be grateful to have confirmed.
By the way, my colleague Frank Morano might be proud of the way I executed that sweet freedom bump with the bar cut. Sort of retro John Gambling days. Anyway, I'm Alexander Garrett, keeping it real. And yes, Americans should be grateful for this. But Jeff Mordock, Washington Times DOJ reporter and a contributor to this podcast, welcome in once again to Keeping It Real.
Thanks for having me, Alex. I appreciate it.
So we know Americans, half of them are not going to be grateful about this outcome. Am I right about that?
Well, it's an interesting outcome. Obviously, the Russian collusion narrative has been blown out of the water here with Mueller's findings. I mean, those findings are pretty unequivocal when it comes to Russian collusion. It gets a lot more murky when we get to the obstruction of justice charge. Mueller found that Mueller found there wasn't enough evidence to move forward, but it certainly painted a damning exoneration of the president. If I'll tell you that if this is a victory, it's a victory for the president, but it's an ugly victory.
And so tell us more about that, because now it sounds like Mueller says Congress can go after the president. I mean, why is he saying that?
Well, Mueller didn't specifically say that. He put it out there that this is that Congress does have oversight authorities. That they do want to make this into a political issue, they can. They do have impeachment authority as part of their oversight. They can pursue that. Obviously, Democrats have been banging that drum even before yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see where how this all plays out. One of the things that's a little frustrating for Democrats is, in a lot of these cases, I think Mueller found 10 incidents that may amount to obstruction, and in at least half a dozen of those, the conclusion was, well, it didn't amount to obstruction because nobody listened to the president or nobody would do what he asked, which is not granted, it is not a crime. It's still not a great look for the president.
Well, and the thing is, though, he could have ended the special counsel. That's the thing that no one's really getting, is that he has the executive authority to end the counsel. Am I right about that?
He did. He absolutely could have ended. He could have pulled the plug on the Mueller probe at any time. He could have pulled the plug on Rod Rosenstein, who was overseeing the Mueller investigation, at any time. And one thing that people forget is, even if President Trump did pull the plug and fire Mueller, it would not have ended the investigation because there were still prosecutors and an active investigation that had been initiative. So it would have still continued. It just would have continued without Mueller. We would have had a fight over a replacement. But yes, the president could have done a lot of things to shut down or withhold information from the special counsel, and the special counsel made it very clear that no information was withheld. And I think he actually even complimented the president's administration on their access in terms of providing emails and witnesses.
And by the way, we've seen three different spins. I hate to say the White House is spinning this, but I feel like they're spinning a certain way. We're seeing Fox News spin a certain way, CNN. But I bring you on, Jeff, because you don't spin this. You say it exactly how you see it. So 400 pages later, what was it like reading through that whole document? Did you get a chance to?
I did get a chance to read through. Some sections I skimmed. I'd like to go back and read them more in depth. It's dry material, but there's some gossipy stuff in there as well. The incident where Jeff Sessions tells President Trump about Robert Mueller's appointment is particularly juicy. I think that is one of the more interesting stories in there. Another story about President Trump ordering Don McGahn to fire Mueller, and Don McGahn choosing to resign, and ultimately he decided not to, but preferring to resign rather than fire Mueller, is also another interesting story. But while they're gossipy and they're interesting and they make good copy for people like me, that doesn't amount to evidence of any kind of wrongdoing. It's just more adds more drama to the soap opera story here.
And so Democrats, and by the way he was talking about, I guess he contrasted or compared Sessions to Holder and Robert Kennedy. But to me, Sessions was better than Eric Holder by far as AG, even if it was a short term there with Sessions.
Well, Sessions did a lot of stuff that the president wanted him to do. Everybody forgets that the president, the president's agenda on immigration, the president's agenda on opioids, the president's speech at his at the convention in 2016 was cracking down on crime. That was the focus of his speech. And Sessions did all that. And I will go so far as to say there's nobody in the Trump administration who did more to enact President Trump's agenda than Jeff Sessions. I don't think you can find another cabinet person to do that. That being said, the Mueller report doesn't paint a great picture of Jeff Sessions. He almost seems blindsided by Rod Rosenstein picking Robert Mueller. He also, at one point, the Mueller's team wrote about they considered prosecuting Jeff Sessions for perjury because he said he hadn't met with any Russians, and then it came out that he had 2 meetings with the Russian ambassador. And they ultimately decided not to because they felt he didn't understand the question or didn't understand the narrow base of the question, which makes him look a little befuddled. As a matter of fact, the only thing in the report that Jeff Sessions seems sure of or confident about is the fact that he needs to recuse. There's a story in there where Don McGahn was really on White House Attorney Don McGahn was really on Jeff Sessions to recuse, and Jeff Sessions really stood his ground and rebuffed those efforts. And that's really the only time in the report he comes across as confident.
So McGahn was White House counsel, am I right? So it's just interesting that they focus on him, but never mind the fact that actually Obama's White House counsel recently got indicted by these reports. So it's funny how one side gets more reporting than the other in this day and age.
Well, there's a couple reasons. One, Robert Mueller was looking into Donald Trump. He wasn't looking into Barack Obama. But also, to your point, Greg Craig, who was the White House counsel who wrote for Obama, who was indicted, is mentioned in the Mueller report. He's in the back in the index where they talk about the cases that are still pending. He's mentioned and listed in there. There is reference, clearly not as much as there's with Don McGahn, but there is Greg Craig in his indictment, and the crimes he's alleged to have committed are detailed in the report.
Now, by the way, we're talking about Jeff Mordock, a Washington Times reporter for the DOJ, and you talk about Sessions, you talk about Bill Barr, two very different people, right? Yesterday's press conference ultimately showed the difference between the two of them. Barr was pretty fierce in that press conference yesterday.
Yes, Barr really stood his ground. He got some tough questions from the media. He stood his ground. He at times if he thought the media was being unduly harsh on him, which you could debate whether they were or not. He gave, and I was in that press conference. He gave, he did give it back to him if he thought he was being treated unfairly. Now, I don't necessarily think those questions were unfair. He seemed to think so by the reaction we got from him. At one point, he even cut a reporter off who was pursuing a line of questioning that he didn't like. I thought particularly got a little snappish when one reporter who was sitting next to me said that said it was Mueller's work, and he pointed out that technically it's not Mueller's work, it's his work because Mueller did it on behalf of him as Attorney General. That was a little legalese, but I could tell that question certainly bothered him.
It did. He said, no, that report is mine. He works for me. And that was a really interesting reply for that. Because also I was thinking he wasn't really working for him since Barr just got in here. That was the other interesting thought of that reply. I was thinking.
I agree, and it's a fair question, too. I look at the report as Robert Mueller's work. I don't look at it as his report. I don't look at it as Bill Barr's work or Bill Barr's report, because you're right, Bill Barr's only been in there for 2 months, I believe. At this point, this started under Jeff Sessions. As a matter of fact, Bill Barr didn't even take it over from Jeff. Well, I guess Rob Rosenstein, I guess Jeff Sessions was used. But in terms of attorney generals at the Department of Justice, he didn't even get the handoff from Sessions' team. He got the handoff from Matt Whitaker's team. So Sessions is honestly 2 attorney generals ago, to show you how long this Mueller probe has been going on.
And Whitaker had his own dealings with when he was under fire there. He got pretty testy with Congress, remember, not too long ago.
He did.
In his hearing.
He did, yeah. He certainly gave it to Congress. They targeted him, which I thought, to be honest, was a little unfair because he's a guy who was put in there. He wasn't, he's put in there as a placeholder. Barr at that point had already been nominated, and I believe was on the path to confirmation. As a matter of fact, I think when Matt Whitaker appeared before Congress, I believe he only had a week left anyway before Bill Barr took over and was was sworn in. So I don't know why they were so hot on Matt Whitaker. And now, here we are about a month after that hearing, and do we hear anything about Matt Whitaker anymore? Is anybody screaming about Matt Whitaker and his alleged conflicts of interest? No, I haven't heard Matt Whitaker's name mentioned in a long time.
Now, one thing where he was asked if he was protecting the president, this guy, Bill Barr, by the way, is a respected, federal worker, a public serviceman. He was the AG for H.W. Bush. He was well respected then. Now, because he's saying what's actually truthful for the president, he's not protecting him. How bizarre is that, Jeff?
Well, Bill Barr has a great reputation. There's no question Bill Barr came into this. He was well respected, and he did get Democrat support. Joe Manchin voted for him. Kirsten Sinema voted for him, which is not something that she's not exactly a conservative firebrand. Kirsten Sinema, she voted for him. He came in with some Democrat support, not a lot, but some, and. It's interesting to see. So he did come in with respect, but I think in terms of the Democrats going after him, it was a little odd that he gave the press conference before anybody could see the report. It made it a little difficult to talk about the report or ask him about the report. I did think that was a little bit of an unusual move on behalf of the Attorney General.
And so where do we go from here? House Dems now want the full report, unredacted, and I think Congress does deserve it, but I think the way the Dems are going about it is just more like vultures than actual people trying to get the information. They're coming at this from a different angle than I think they should be coming from it. But nonetheless, they want the full report.
It's political theater. It's absolutely political theater with the Democrats, because I think ultimately the full report, maybe not the full report, but a lot of stuff that's redacted is going to start coming out without the courts, without FOIA. I mean, Bill Barr did say if there's something I forget exactly how I phrased it, but essentially told Congress, if there's something that's redacted you want to know about, let me know, and we'll try to work to make that happen. I think and him saying that, and he's releasing an unredacted version to the Gang of Eight, which is a bipartisan group of lawmakers who handle sensitive national security issues. So they're going to see it. I mean, I expect more information to be released to Congress and the public without, government oversight organizations filing a multitude of FOIA requests and without the courts.
Now, one other aspect of this, the whole spying comment that Barr did say not less, a week ago or so, that still lingers. And I think we're going to see that other side and what he's exactly meaning. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think we will learn a lot more about what his view on whether or not somebody was spying on the Trump campaign. As we understand it, he's put together a team to review the matter, and it's kind of interesting because now that's the third review of this. We've got Michael Horowitz, who's the Department of Justice Inspector General. He's looking into this, and his report's supposed to be due May or June, according to Bill Barr. John Huber, that's a really interesting thing. If you have time and want to talk about the John Huber probe, he's supposed to be doing his own probe, but now we're going to have Bill Barr do his own probe. So I don't know if all these are going to work together or everybody's doing their own probe independent of each other. So it's interesting where all of these investigations wind up.
And of course, Devin Nunes with the criminal referrals. Cannot forget about that, can we?
Exactly. Yes. Good point. Yes, absolutely.
And one other thing while I have you is I was kind of surprised when they said, oh, the president's making money off your spying comment. I thought, wow, that's interesting. But I guess Trump jumped on that pretty quickly.
He did, and not only did he jump on that pretty quickly, he also said his reelection campaign sent out a fundraising effort just on Bill Barr's press conference, which I thought was kind of interesting, asking people to stand with him before the release of the Mueller report. That came out a couple hours after Bill Barr's press conference was announced. So the reelection campaign is certainly trying to seize on this and use it to fatten their coffers.
Hey, Jeff, you are our guy for this whole Mueller saga. It's not over, so we'll definitely have you back for that and more of the good stuff, DOJ. We didn't even get to the stuff that the DOJ is doing that's not even being talked about. I mean, you'd normally do that.
Well, what's interesting is everybody forgets the Robert Mueller investigation is 1% of what the DOJ is doing. Nobody talks about there's a lot of interesting stuff going on at the DOJ. I just did a story about animal cruelty prosecutions for poaching. Judges aren't taking these cases seriously. I mean, that's an important issue. Nobody's talking about that. Opioids, nobody's talking about that. Justice Department wants a pretty aggressive crackdown on sexual harassment in housing. Nobody's talking about that. So a lot of stuff going on at the DOJ that people should pay attention to that is totally unrelated to the Mueller report.
And where can we find you again on Twitter? Remind us where we can find you.
At Jeff Mordock, and you can always find me on the homepage of the Washington Times, WashingtonTimes.com. My stuff's always there, and not only is my stuff there, but there's a lot of stuff from a lot of other great reporters working to get the truth out of what's happening down here in Washington.
Exactly, and I think you guys have a fairly down the road portrayal of what's going on there, unlike a lot of these other write-up, sites and news networks. It's kind of crazy how one side could say this and the other says that, but that's how we are in today's world. But you guys are pretty down the middle, and I appreciate that. So, Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we will talk to you soon on Keeping It Real with Alexander Garrett.
Great. Thanks. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. I'm Alexander Garrett once again, and talk to you soon.